The great hall of the AAS conclave stood silent, every shadow alive with tension. Into that silence came the voice of Overlord Boros, his holographic form towering 10 meters high, a giant of obsidian light and steel angles. His words struck like a hammer. Your time of hiding behind paper treaties is over. For 20 long minutes, he poured out accusations, lies about piracy, cowardice, and dishonor. He spoke not for truth but for power, his voice like grinding stone echoing across the chamber. Behind every word stood the shadow of the Telkine 7th Fleet, 50 warships burning across space toward Heracles 9. Every ambassador in the chamber knew the charges were false, yet none dared object, for the truth was written in crimson icons advancing on the star maps. Boros ended his tirade with a raised fist, declaring that the Dominion would restore order by force. Then, with a flash of golden motes, his massive form vanished, leaving only silence and unease. In that stillness stood the lone human avatar, Ambassador Kuran. Unlike Boros, he was no giant, only a wary man in a simple gray suit, his face marked by years of quiet resolve. For 10 long seconds he said nothing, only stared. Then his image, too, faded away. With that act, humanity gave its answer. The time for talking was done. Boros Declares War. Overlord Boros's speech was not the words of a negotiator. It was the roar of a conqueror. His avatar loomed like a mountain of black steel, every word laced with contempt. He accused the Terran colony of Heracles 9 of piracy and aggression, branding their survival as cowardice dressed in pacifism. None in the chamber believed him, but belief no longer mattered. What mattered was the 7th Fleet, already in motion, its crimson trail cutting through the void toward the Elysian Traverse. Boros's voice shook the chamber as he claimed patience had run its course, restraint mistaken for weakness. He promised not punishment but restoration. Restoration of order, of fear, of Telkine dominance. His gauntleted hand rose high, a gesture of finality, a promise of war. The Dominion, he declared, no longer recognized the Terran mandate's authority. Their fleets would descend on Heracles 9, and the galaxy would watch as the price of defiance was carved into history. Around him, the avatars of other species shifted uneasily, their features betraying dread at the storm about to be unleashed. But Boros had no interest in their doubt. His image dissolved in a blaze of golden fragments, leaving behind the echo of his threat, heavy as chains on the hall. The conclave had witnessed more than words. They had witnessed the opening shot of war, and the galaxy trembled at its sound. Humans leave in silence. When Boros's golden fragments faded from the air, all eyes turned to the only figure left upon the dais. Ambassador Kuran. His avatar was no giant of war, no polished monument of power, but the plain image of a weary man in a dark gray suit. His lined face carried no fire, only stillness, a quiet gravity that held the chamber in place. For 10 long seconds, the conclave remained frozen. 100 species waited uneasy for humanity's reply. Would the Terrans protest? Would they plead? Would they roar back at Boros's threats? Kuran did none of these. His avatar did not raise its voice or hand. It did not move at all. And then, without a word, it winked out of existence. The days stood empty, the silence heavier than any speech. That absence spoke more than defiance. It declared that humanity would not waste another breath on hollow treaties, that their answer would not come from words, but from action. Across the chamber, avatars stirred, some with unease, some with fear, a few with grim respect. The message was clear. The humans had left the stage, but not the fight. They had chosen silence as their last word, and silence, in that moment, was louder than Boros's thunder. The galaxy understood the time for talking was finished. The next reply would come in war. Corin prepares for battle. Far from the grand chamber of the conclave, the command deck of the Terran diplomatic cruiser Indomitable was alive with a different energy. Here, there were no marble floors or glowing avatars, only the harsh scent of scrubbers, the ozone bite of electronics, and consoles worn smooth by years of duty. Corin stood before the vast holographic map of the Heracles system. Gone was the still diplomat in a gray suit. The man himself radiated coiled energy, every line of his face sharpened by the weight of memory and responsibility. On the display, 50 crimson icons slid like a tide across the stars, their paths converging on a single stubborn blue point, Heracles 9. Corin's hand curled into a fist at his side, a habit born long ago on battlefields where choices meant cities burning. For a moment, the phantom smell of ash and ionized air haunted him, a ghost of past wars. Then the vision was gone, replaced by cold clarity. "They've crossed the system perimeter, sir," reported Lieutenant Serena, his sharp-eyed second, every word crisp. Corin's gaze did not waver. "They are predictable," he murmured, voice low and steady. "It is their strength and their weakness." The map glowed before him, red against blue, the stage set. He was no longer the wary ambassador. He was once again the predator, preparing for the hunt. "Serena reports the enemy move." Lieutenant Serena stood at her console, her posture straight, her voice sharp with focus. The approaching icons of the Telkine fleet filled the holographic map in a crimson wave. "Full battle array, no deviations," she reported, her dark eyes locked on the data streams, exactly as predicted by Mila's models. Her tone carried no surprise, only confirmation of the inevitable. Corin turned slightly toward her, his gaze steady, unreadable. "They are predictable people," he murmured, each word measured. "That is their greatest strength and their most exploitable weakness." Serena gave a curt nod, fingers moving swiftly across her controls. "Heracles 9 is acknowledging the alert via our Ansible link. Standing by for command. Mila Fen is online." The deck was quiet, every officer waiting for Corin's decision. Around them, consoles hummed, status lights blinked, and the tension pressed down like gravity itself. Serena's voice, calm yet edged with steel, cut through that silence. She was more than an officer. She was the mirror to Corin's intent, the voice that carried his will across the ship. In her words was the confirmation that the time for diplomacy had ended. The fleet was moving, the enemy was coming, and humanity's quiet response was beginning to unfold. The galaxy had seen Boros declare war. Now it would see how humans answered it, breaking the broadcast rules. The chamber had gone dark, Boros's threat still echoing across the galaxy, but on the Indomitable's bridge, Corin's eyes burned with a different light. He stood before his officers, no longer the silent ambassador but the man who had once commanded entire armies. "Reactivate my avatar at the conclave," he ordered. Lieutenant Velas hesitated, her brow furrowed. "Sir, the session is over. The rules forbid propaganda. Our channel will be blocked." Corin's reply was quiet, but each syllable struck like steel. "Procedure is a cage for men who cannot imagine a better way. Reactivate it, and make it public." A stunned silence fell. Velas blinked, her composure wavering as she grasped the scale of his intent. He wanted not a private rebuttal, but a broadcast to every independent network, raw and unfiltered. A direct challenge to the unspoken law of silence. Corin's voice cut through again, steady as a blade. "We'll embed their observation feed into ours. My avatar will stand in their chamber, but my voice will belong to us. They cannot shut us down without silencing themselves. And they won't. They are too curious." For a breathless moment, the crew absorbed the audacity of it. Then Velas's hesitation hardened into resolve. "Yes, sir." The cage had been broken, and the galaxy would soon hear humanity speak. Mila Fen on Heracles 9. On the windswept mesa of Heracles 9, Mila Fen stood with her coat whipping in the constant storm. Dust scarred the rock, the scent of ozone and sulfur carried by the endless wind. Below her stretched the Erebus or complex, a sprawling engine of industry. To most, she was a geologist, a woman who knew the bones of the world better than anyone alive. But the truth was far deeper. For 15 years, she had turned this colony into a fortress disguised as a mine. Every railgun built to fling ore into orbit, every geothermal vent designed to bleed the planet's heat, every condenser and pulverizer, all were pieces of a hidden design. Now, above her, the twilight sky filled with burning trails, the Telkine 7th Fleet, descending like vengeful gods. Mila's comlink buzzed. All stations report ready. The welcoming committee is in place. She breathed once, tasting grit and iron, then answered with steady resolve. They're in orbital insertion. Phase 1. Go. Across the continent, a hum that had echoed for a decade went silent. Massive machines shifted purpose. Mining stopped. War began. Mila's face was unreadable, her eyes locked on the falling stars. She was only a geologist, standing on stone. But tonight, she would teach the Telkine Dominion what planetary science truly meant. A colony built for war for years, Heracles 9 had been seen as nothing more than a rugged mining world, its people bent under the weight of ore and dust. But beneath the disguise of industry lay a secret design. Every structure, every machine, every system had a second purpose: the orbital freight accelerators. Colossal magnetic rails meant to launch cargo into orbit were also weapons capable of hurling death instead of stone. The geothermal stations that bled the planet's fiery heart into the sky could redirect that fury into streams of weaponized plasma. Even the seismic pulverizers, tools of miners to fracture the crust, were tuned to tear armies apart when needed. None of this hardware could truly be hidden. A 30-kilometer railgun was impossible to disguise. The secret was in the doctrine, the unassuming software woven into the colony's systems, waiting for one order to reprogram an entire world for war. Mila Fen had been the architect, sent by Corin long ago to turn theory into reality. And now, as the Telkine fleet descended with arrogant confidence, those hidden teeth began to bare. The miners and workers of Heracles 9 had lived under the illusion of toil. Tonight, they would reveal themselves not as laborers, but as defenders of a fortress disguised as a colony. The sky fills with warships. Twilight over Heracles 9 was never gentle. But this night it became terrifying. Where stars should have shimmered, brighter lights carved their way through the sky. Dozens of Telkine warships, their engines burning like falling suns, pierced the upper atmosphere. To the miners watching from the colony domes, they seemed like vengeful gods descending, their hulls glowing red with friction. On tactical feeds, the 7th Fleet moved with chilling precision. Destroyers forming attack lines, cruisers preparing orbital bombardments, landing craft angling toward their chosen drop zones. The air shook with the thunder of their arrival, a storm of fire streaking across the heavens. For the Telkine, this was routine, a display of overwhelming power meant to crush morale before the first shot was fired. But on the mesas and within the bunkers of Heracles 9, the colonists did not cower. They watched, waiting, every hidden system primed to respond. Among them stood Mila Fen, her eyes locked on the fiery trails above. To her, these ships were not gods but targets, each one a problem with a solution she had prepared for years. As the stars vanished beneath the Telkine fleet's glare, Heracles 9 stood ready. The invaders thought themselves hunters. They were stepping into a trap built by human hands. The first plasma lance, the Telkine flagship Iron Resolve, crackled with arrogant authority as Overlord Boros's voice boomed across open channels. "You have 60 seconds to surrender," he declared, his words meant to break the colony's spirit. To prove his power, a battle cruiser, the Honor's Edge, fired a warning shot. A dense kinetic slug, the size of a ground vehicle, ripped through the thin upper air, aimed to shatter Heracles 9's communications array. It never reached its target. From the surface, what looked like an ordinary geothermal vent suddenly roared to life. A lance of blue-white plasma, magnetically contained and driven to near light speed, tore upward. It struck the slug dead center. There was no explosion, only instant annihilation. The massive projectile vaporized to nothing in a blinding flash. The lance carved through the sky, leaving a burning scar across the atmosphere. On the honor's edge, alarm screamed as officers reeled in disbelief. Across the galaxy, millions watched the feed in stunned silence. The Telkine had come expecting miners with crude weapons. Instead, they had met science itself turned into a weapon. In the conclave, avatars shifted uneasily. On Boros's face, smug satisfaction twisted into shock. And on Heracles 9, the first plasma lance marked the end of illusions. Humanity had answered. Kuran's calm response in the conclave chamber, the shock was palpable. Avatars flickered with unease as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. A Telkine slug, meant as a display of dominance, erased mid-flight by a searing lance of plasma. For a moment, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. Then Kuran's avatar reappeared on the dais. He did not roar like Boros. He did not gesture or posture. He simply stood, a plain man in a gray suit, his presence calm in the storm. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber and through the networks now broadcasting to billions. "You say we avoid war," he began, quiet but unshakable. "That is true." His head tilted slightly, eyes steady. "We'd avoid it because we know its cost. We keep ledgers from our past, lists of lives, cities, dreams, all turned to ash. We read the bill before we sign the contract." His words contrasted Boros's fury with surgical clarity. He was not just answering the Telkine, he was speaking to every species watching, teaching them what humanity had learned in blood. The silence that followed was not emptiness but weight. The galaxy had seen Boros thunder and humans remained still. Now it saw the meaning of that stillness, carried in a voice that trembled with memory but not fear. The canyon trap, the Telkine ground invasion came with brutal precision. Armored landing craft screamed through the skies, shields glowing as they pierced the atmosphere. They descended toward a wide canyon near the Erebus complex, a natural corridor offering cover and a straight path to their objective. To them, it was the obvious choice. To Mila Fen, it was a kill box she had prepared for a decade. On her rugged tablet, sensed to seismic and optical sensors buried deep in the rock, icons of Telkine troops advanced in tight formation. Shock soldiers in heavy armor, pulse rifles gleaming, marched with flawless discipline. They expected frightened miners with crude weapons. Instead, they walked deeper into the funnel. Mila's second, Deke, scarred and grizzled, watched beside her. "Cocky bastards," he muttered. Mila's eyes never left the display. They see a straight line. They take it, always. 2 kilometers in, still no resistance. Confidence spread through their command feeds. To them, the earlier plasma strike must have been a fluke. On Mila's screen, a progress bar reached full. Her voice was steady, flat as stone. "All units in the box. Trigger the pulverizers." Deke entered the command. The ground began to hum. Not a sound of battle, but the deep thrum of a planet awakening. The canyon was about to collapse. Soldiers buried by the earth at first, the Telkine shock troops, thought it was an earthquake. The canyon floor trembled beneath their armored boots, a low vibration that rattled teeth and armor alike. Then the hum rose into a grinding roar, focused and unnatural. High on the canyon walls, massive slabs of rock, each the size of towers, sheared loose. Perfectly timed resonance waves, triggered by the seismic pulverizers Mila Fen had buried years ago, tore through the fault lines. The canyon became a trap, closing its jaws. Entire cliff faces collapsed inward in controlled sequence, a storm of stone falling with unstoppable force. Soldiers looked up too late, their discipline breaking as shadows swallowed them. Hundreds were crushed in an instant. Armored vehicles vanished into fissures as the canyon floor split wide, buckling and collapsing under precise stress. Dust clouds rose like volcanic ash, choking the air, blotting out the stars. From her mesa miles away, Mila watched through a drone feed, her face unreadable. On her tactical map, red icons, The first wave of the Telkine ground force blinked out, erased in seconds. Around her, operators logged data, recalibrating systems for the next strike. Mila did not smile. There was no triumph, only grim necessity. The planet itself had become humanity's weapon, and the Earth had just swallowed its invaders whole. Boros accuses humans in the AS conclave. Outrage erupted as the live feeds showed the canyon collapse. Thousands of Telkine soldiers buried alive, armored divisions erased not by armies but by the very ground beneath them. The chamber, once silent, now hummed with horrified murmurs. Then Boros's avatar blazed back into existence, his obsidian figure trembling with fury. His voice cracked across the chamber like a whip. "This is not war, this is barbarism! You slaughtered our soldiers with cowardly tricks, hidden machines, and lies. You have no honor!" His roar rattled the walls, a storm of rage born from shock and humiliation. Yet his words, meant as condemnation, rang hollow. Even as he bellowed, Kuran's avatar stood calm, its stillness cutting deeper than Boros's fire. Around them, the feeds shifted again, displaying Telkine cruisers adjusting targeting vectors. Not at military outposts, but at Heracles 9's habitation domes. Civilian targets. Other feeds revealed orders intercepted from Telkine commanders. Cleanse the canyon. Leave no survivors. The hypocrisy hung in the air like poison. Kuran's eyes, quiet but unflinching, swept across the chamber. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but sharper than Boros's rage. Honor is a luxury. Survival is necessity. You speak of honor while aiming your weapons at civilians. The galaxy watched, and Boros's accusations fell apart, exposing Telkine hypocrisy. The feeds played out across the conclave chamber, raw and undeniable. One showed Telkine cruisers aligning for bombardment. Not against defenses, but against Heracles 9's main habitation dome, where families sheltered. Another carried intercepted orders, commanders directing troops to execute wounded survivors in the canyon. The mask of Telkine honor cracked before every watching species. Kuran's avatar remained perfectly still, the embodiment of quiet judgment. His voice cut through Boros's fury like a blade. You speak of honor while targeting civilians. You speak of courage while ordering executions. You accuse us of cowardice while hiding atrocity beneath words. He let the silence stretch, the evidence glowing in the feeds for all to see. We did not seek this fight, he continued, eyes sweeping the chamber. But you brought it to us. And since you are so keen to broadcast lessons, we will provide one. The words landed with the weight of inevitability. Around the chamber, avatars shifted. Some horrified, others grimly attentive. Kuran was not defending humanity. He was indicting the Telkine before the galaxy itself. For every lie Boros had shouted, there now stood truth in burning light. The Dominion had declared itself noble. Now all could see it for what it was, a predator unmasked, exposed by the very people it had tried to shame. Ghost strikes in space beyond Heracles 9, the war shifted into shadows. The Telkine fleet, vast and disciplined, tightened its formation around supply trains and picket ships. Yet in the black silence of space, phantoms stirred. The Magpie, a small freighter disguised as junk, lurked in the shadow of the system's gas giant. At its controls, Pilot Sparrow chewed a nutrient stick, eyes fixed on her tactical display. Targets locked, her co-pilot murmured. With a calm nod, Sparrow tapped her console. The Magpie vanished in a flash of a micro-jump, reappearing thousands of kilometers away on the flank of a Telkine logistics convoy. 3 lumbering tenders carried fuel, ammunition, and drones, unguarded, unprepared. Sparrow's voice was steady. Payloads away. 2 dense metal rods streaked out, spearing the lead tender. The explosion blossomed silently, tearing the convoy apart. At the same instant, a hidden data burst slipped into the convoy's systems. A cyber warfare seed, invisible and deadly. Before the shockwave faded, the Magpie jumped again, already hunting its next target. Across the system, a dozen more disguised freighters struck and vanished. never engaging head-on, always hitting the weak points: fuel depots, sensor relays, comms links. To the Telkine it felt like fighting ghosts. To the galaxy watching, it was proof humans didn't fight fair. They fought to win. Boros falls for the bait on the bridge of the Iron Resolve. Chaos bled into fury. Overlord Boros raged as report after report arrived. Fuel tenders gone, depots silent, networks riddled with ghost signals. His second, Subcommander Vrek, stood stiff, voice carefully neutral. "Sir, their tactics are disruptive but effective. At this rate, the blockade will collapse within 48 hours. We should consolidate and protect the supply lines." The word protect snapped Boros's restraint. His eyes burned, jaw rigid. To retreat, even to safeguard logistics, echoed the shame of his family's past. His grandfather exiled for prudence mistaken as cowardice. Boros slammed his fist into the throne, denting the metal. "We are the Telkine 7th Fleet. We do not protect, we attack. Break formation. Hunt these vermin down." Around him, officers exchanged silent glances, knowing the trap had been sprung. Pulling heavy escorts away from the jump lane left their only lifeline exposed. The humans had baited them with phantom strikes, and Boros, blinded by rage and honor, had taken it. His voice thundered with pride, but in his crew's eyes flickered doubt and despair. For they understood what Boros did not. In choosing glory over caution, he had not saved his house's name. He had doomed his entire fleet. Humans shatter the jump relay from the shadows of Heracles' 9's gas giant. The true colony defense fleet emerged. For days they had hidden, waiting. Freighters armed with heavy weapons and hardened shields, their drives flaring to full power. But they did not charge the Telkine warships. Instead, they aimed for the one fragile artery of the 7th Fleet, the jump lane relay. It was no fortress, only a delicate ring of exotic matter projectors keeping open the corridor back to Dominion space. Now stripped of its escorts by Boros's pride, it stood nearly undefended. The CDF attacked in unison, unleashing a storm of plasma torpedoes, kinetic slugs, and laser fire. The pickets guarding the relay were swatted aside, shredded before they could sound alarms. A single volley struck the relay's core. For a moment, it shone brilliant blue, then buckled. The corridor collapsed inward, its energy erupting in a silent gravitational shockwave that twisted metal into ruin. In seconds, the lifeline home was gone. 50 warships, the pride of the Telkine Dominion, were stranded light years from aid,